All right, we're back. This is
Wow.
episode
Episode
two.
two.
Welcome,
Yeah.
everyone.
It's been a while since our
Um,
last episode. We've been busy. A lot's changed since then, and there's a
I know,
lot that's
I
been
know.
happening.
We should definitely talk about some of the changes. I'll let you go first since you've had a bigger change than I have. Oh yeah, go for it.
Yes. So I've moved to London, and now I'm studying a master's in data science. So that's taken up a lot of my time, and the move and everything. It's been quite hectic. And we've still been working on it and trying to, continue our journey as best as we can. But sometimes it just gets so busy that we haven't had time.
Yeah, and it's very commendable. I have to say that you have decided to continue to collaborate. It's sometimes it's tempting to want to just do a reset and maybe just do a clean slate when you move. In your case, you've moved countries and started something new. But kudos to you for wanting to keep doing it. I really appreciate that you want to continue to do this with me. So yeah, I mean it's been great, even in spite of yeah. For me personally, nothing really has changed other than that I remain even more convinced that this moving target, the title of our podcast, this target, if anything, is actually moving even faster. So
Then we
the
imagined,
rate
yeah.
at which,
Then we imagined.
yeah, the rate at which things are changing in this world, in this AI ecosystem, and specifically around sort of agents and all the stuff that goes into building them. And agents is really one of the things that it's the new shiny object. I mean, obviously, the we were calling this podcast the moving target precisely because we chose to focus on a moving target because we think that there's value to our listeners, to basically of us banging our head against this stuff. So anyway, so it's been nothing short of frustrating at times, but also a little head spinning for me personally. And
Yeah, we
I
found,
think I
but we
was
found some amazing things. Like the thing is, like most of our work and whatever we were looking at, it's been amazing. Like, our actual intuition about things and the tools we've been using, the models we were using, the way we were using the models, and everything we were thinking about, actually
yeah
was confirmed by big labs, and big labs adopting the same kind of ideologies and same kind of take on it. And our whole thing, and what our gut said when we were training the models and building the initial chatbot for Vesta was, okay, it's context, right? If we can just give it more context, so we can give it more information in a better way. The system prompt has so much to do with it, and the complexities which we were looking at the system prompt, and how much it's
yeah
come out since then. Where you have Claude's 32,000 word system prompt, which is, in
yeah
itself making more sense, because these models need direction, and the direction is context, right? They are very good at going with what you give them, but you have to give it to them very straight. There can be no ambiguity. Like if there is
that's
ambiguity,
right.
then they run with it. That's where the hallucination comes from, because
Yeah,
as you'd said, it's more of a design feature than a bug, and it's there for good reason.
absolutely. And I think that's really for me. I've been in software for 30 years now, and every system I've ever built, maybe with the exception of a few where I was doing sort of, modeling noise in my very early days when I was writing software that was simulating, white noise generators and things like that. I've always dealt with a system where once it was built, it didn't matter what version of it. If it was literally just a sine wave generator, or even something that was like a text chat, right? A chat based system. Once you coded it up and you deployed it, whatever input you gave it, let's say you gave it, I want to go from point A to point B, that output was deterministic. In other words, if you gave it the same input 100 times, the output was guaranteed to be the same, right?
Yeah.
There was never a universe where on the 99th time or the 50th time, the output would be subtly different or slightly different. Uh, what I think people that like you and I that are working with LLMs are realizing is that at the core of our application, whatever we build, whether we're building like a Q&A chatbot or a revision bot or even an autonomous agent, which is a little more dangerous. Uh, at the core of it is this engine that is non-deterministic. It's stochastic. Stochastic is just a fancy word for saying it's probabilistic. It does also all sorts of stuff that's all based on probabilities, which means that you can actually have a scenario, which you and I'm sure anyone who's basically spent any time on GPT can attest to, is that the minute you can actually, and it's funny because I don't even know if they do that anymore, but GPT used to let you generate, if you didn't like an answer, you could regenerate the answer. Like if
Yeah,
you
and
were
then it
talking
would
to
give you,
GPT,
yeah, you could do that, and it would
and it
give
would
you
give
two
you a totally
options,
different answer. I mean, the
and
answer was not qualitatively different. It
it
was not
it was just
qualitatively
phrased
it was about the
differently.
same.
Some information was different, and then you had the thumbs
Correct.
down and everything which they came up with.
Yeah.
But I think there's a term which I think is there is not much reinforcement learning in LLMs. I think the degree to which they're doing it is not as apparent in actual use cases because they're not learning a lot, right? And then there was this thing which came out recently where ChatGPT was having issues because of the memory function, where people stored prompts in it. So if anybody's using ChatGPT tomorrow, you can go and see like GPT-5 and just ask it what's in my memory, and it'll give you like things you've told it to remember which you won't even remember telling it, right? It's like small things you must have said, okay, only use caps for this, and that's why you get certain strange prompt. So the thing is, they don't have a very good way of storing memory and context, which
That's
is
so interesting. I actually did not know that. So go back again. Tell me. I'm learning something new from you every day, as
okay. So
always.
I figured this out myself because I was trying to build something. You remember when we I was trying to build that diagram, the mermaid diagram
Yes, yes,
for
yes, yes.
our hospitality thing, which we'll come to later. Basically, I asked ChatGPT that what's in your memory, like what do you remember, and it gave me like a pop up with like a checklist of everything I told it, and I told it some things a year ago maybe, and it remembered them, and that's what it was basing the whole personality of, because
That's
it's
so
basically
interesting.
so you've
That's
given it
so
prompts which it
interesting.
remembers. So if you ever like come across something where it's getting stuck, where it's going back to a certain pattern, it's because of this. And it's so like
But
just it was on the top of my head. It
no,
didn't
go
come up in a recent meeting, but I was like, it's so interesting that they are storing context because it is useful, but it can be a problem as well because the wrong context will drive that model insane.
that is very, very interesting to me. I mean, on many fronts. But firstly, thank you for that. I'll go look at it. But what that's suggesting to me is that ChatGPT 5 is following kind of a brute force approach, or maybe ChatGPT is doing it because it can, which is it tries to remember everything you've given it without trying to be cute or smart about compressing that. And I think that's I'm learning a little bit. Again, I don't claim to be an expert about any of this stuff, but that brings us to this well-known issue which is called context collapse. Not model collapse, but context collapse. And context collapse happens when you have these systems where, say, I'm having and this is something that I found out when I was at one of these open source conferences, and I was talking to just somebody I was talking to a researcher from IBM. They'd just given a talk about Granite. Granite is there, by the way, their Llama, which we should at some
We should
point,
have a
we
look
should
at.
look into it. It's definitely
Because
we should
they've
have some.
acquired they've really acquired some big businesses in the open source space, and they're actually using a lot of them, like Langflow is theirs, AstraDB is theirs. They've got quite, and they're acquiring pretty quickly, and they're acquiring through shell companies or other companies.
I didn't know that AstraDB and Langflow is now owned by. No, I knew about Langflow.
No,
Astra, of course,
AstraDB,
we found out through. Yeah, yeah,
because
yeah,
we
yeah, yeah,
found
that's
out that
right,
there was a
Langflow.
connection, like
Yes, yes,
but
yes, yes,
IBM is
yes,
not
yes.
putting their name on it directly, so they
I
own
I see.
so they own a lot of
That's
AI real
so
estate.
interesting.
And I
That's
think
so
Olama is going to be
interesting.
next to go, but I think there are alternatives, right? And what we're learning is that
Yeah.
you have to stay true to what was there, which can't be sold in that sense. That you need to have it as raw and like old school in a way, where you're building it
Yeah,
from the ground up, and you have like key principles, and the code you're using is clean and it's replicable. That's the thing in the AI space. To get replicable results is what's important, because even an LLM will never give you the same result twice, even if you ask it
totally
for it.
agree. Totally agree. Totally
And
agree.
replicate.
No, yeah. What I started to say about context was that I was talking to this IBM researcher, and I kept asking him about context and memory, and he said, do you realize that I didn't know this at the time, right? Because I mean, I was still learning, but I that was the day it dawned on me that if you have an open thread with any chatbot, um, every successive turn, it's called a turn. I mean, this is sort of the term of art, right? Every successive
Yeah.
turn, which is basically you creating a follow-up prompt and hitting submit, actually appends everything into the context window until it
Yeah,
can,
it
right?
does.
So basically, the context window keeps growing for the most part. As far as I can tell, most of these companies are following a very cut and paste approach. They are not interested in summarizing, because the risk there is this thing called context collapse, where if they try to get cute about summarizing your turns, sometimes the LLM can actually compress that context into
It too
such a
much.
way that it becomes useless. Not useless, it just basically then it has to. And so this context collapse happens when you run out of space in your context window, then you have to collapse it, then you have to essentially summarize it. And when you summarize it, the summary is so generic that your performance actually degrades, and it's degrading in the middle of a really long conversation. So your user is wondering, like, what the hell just happened? This was giving me very concrete, coherent answers, and now all of a sudden the answers have gone to shit. So that's a well-known issue with context. And I connected the dots only recently about that, right? Just realizing that it's the reason is it's all they're doing right now is feeding all your junk, and I think your junk being all the stuff you've put in. And I think your realization of when you asked ChatGPT for the memory that it had, it essentially
Yeah,
just put some
it has
memory.
traces. It doesn't have like concrete things. It's like, one time I said, you must do this. And it just remembers that. Like, you speak to it in such a direct manner, and that you
Oh,
give it instructions, but you don't know what
oh,
instructions are getting stored. So, like, it's like
interesting.
you have to have a
Yeah, so
context
it's almost
cleanup.
like, yeah,
You have to
context
clean up
cleanup
your
and pruning. I
context.
mean, I like to call it pruning. Pruning is literally the most important thing. I'm starting to think about all of this stuff, context specifically, as a garden you need to maintain, right? It's literally like
Yeah, you need to
basically
get rid of the dead
maintaining a garden.
leaves. You need to keep. It's like a bonsai tree. It's like it
It's a
requires
bonsai.
utmost care every day.
Exactly. Literally, you read my mind. I was reading about bonsai. I was thinking about bonsai tree, because what's important about a bonsai? It's basically, it needs to look nice,
It's
but it also needs
meticulous.
to be a
You have to be
representation of a
meticulous.
tree.
You have to be very
It has to be
meticulous in the way
meticulous.
you're
Exactly.
pruning it,
Yeah.
and the
So
utmost
I
care.
I, I really think this is going to be the next. I would say that in the next 6 months we're going to see UIs appear where I think there was this huge attraction initially with having a super simple UI, because Google made it like, Google's like the original, the OG simplifier of UIs, right?
Yeah,
They
for sure.
basically figured out that, again, long before you, like around the time you were born, there was six browsers, right? There was, Alta Vista, Lycos, Yahoo. There was a few others I can't remember. And then Google came about and said, all this clutter that's there in the visual field, we're going to get rid of it. And we're just going to have a simple text box. And that's all you need. Everything else flows from there. I
It's
feel that the OpenAI guys have gotten a little too enamored with that, and then by extension, everybody else. And I think what needs to happen is this whole idea of pruning your context is going to become increasingly important. And I think um, very soon it may be like a Park Xerox moment at some point. Like somebody's going to have to invent a UI which shows you exactly what your pruning is, like what your current context looks like. And it needs to be so obvious and like basically just but simple for people to just prune their context. Or maybe it's like, again, I'm running with, I'm taking this metaphor a little too far, but I love it. But it's like, imagine having a garden of little trees, right? And I have my tree for I have one separate bonsai tree for every different thread that I have open
Yeah.
with my AI, right? Because obviously, maybe one conversation is related to like airline points, another conversation is related to, I don't know. I mean,
You have a lot
pick
of
a topic.
diversity. There's a lot of diversity in the conversations you have, because the thing is, it's a benefit and a downside of having
Correct,
an AI model which is so easy to use, is basically the
correct,
word. Easy to use. It's
correct,
friendly to use.
correct.
And it gives you answers in a way which you can digest. It's
Right,
digestible. And that's the thing. For people, they will put up with anything as long as it's digestible. Right? They
right,
want it in their way. So like if it's
right.
content, it's anything. And the thing is, humans are impatient at nature. If you give it to them quick, they will not want it slow.
Yep.
If you can give them even 80% as good, but in 3 seconds, rather than taking 5 minutes to go through Google searches and figure it out and doing your research, they will do it that way, because essentially it's like a primal thing, right? You're always wanting to get everything as quickly as possible. If they didn't have to hunt,
I,
they wouldn't hunt it.
I totally agree, and I think we've sort of
Comfort is at
spent
the
a
bottom. Star at like comfort's at the top of that. Like it's what slows down humans.
yes, absolutely. I could completely agree. I think we had decided we were going to do a little bit of a brief recap. It's now been about almost 15-16 minutes. So you want to do a little bit of a recap, but just to establish some continuity and then talk about
Yeah,
where we
so
are and what we've done over the last month and a half. We've not been idle. I feel like I want to have both sort of, and I don't know how you feel about this, but I feel like you and I could spend an entire hour just talking about all the stuff that's in our head, and that would be a useful podcast. But I don't want this podcast to be just about us, like
banging.
reading the news
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah,
talking
good.
about, oh, look what's happening here and making predictions.
Yeah, we have a
I,
lot
I
of
want this I
we
want
have
this
a
to
lot of
be like, useful, actionable insights
content.
based on actual, building shit.
Yeah.
So let's summarize our last podcast.
Let
Do you
me
want to
just
try? Do
I
you,
have it
you
I have
want
it
to take a bit?
written I have it written down here. So
Awesome.
let me just tell you. So okay. So the last podcast we were talking about a lot. We actually started off with our journey into AI and everything and how we were building. And since that point, actually, we built the chatbot back then. We got Olama working. We were using LangChain. We were using Qwen, and we found out that Qwen was a great model, and we wanted to actually evaluate stuff. So all of our learnings from last podcast is what we actually went and did a lot of work on and spent a lot of time trying to find the best way to evaluate the things, which we'll come to as like our next section. But like, we haven't been idle since the last podcast. We've been working pretty much 3-4 times a week at this, and we've been trying to find more engaging things to grip the AI world with. It's like, we need something where our whole mission was to empower the human and to keep the human
Yeah.
in the loop. And
Yeah.
something which I want to add, that mathematician recently solved a very complex proof using GPT as a
Yeah.
aid. Wasn't
Yeah.
solved completely by GPT, but he said it made it much faster for him to solve. We can attach the link
Right.
in the bio if you guys want to go through it. It was quite an interesting read about where the world of AI is going. And that's our philosophy. And it gives us a little bit of reassurance is that we're going in the right way. And the right way is to give humans the ability to excel and save time. We don't want to replace them, because humans can be even more excellent using AI. Right? Machines, in a sense, are not. The thing is, you can never account for the human factor in a machine, right? You can't account for that common sense which you just assume with a human.
Yeah.
There are certain
Yeah.
assumptions which you can't put on paper, and
Yeah.
we wouldn't have enough paper in the whole world to do it. So I mean, we're just like trying
Yeah.
to
No,
figure out.
I'm reading about. Yeah, no, it's completely in line with that. I read something which I thought again was a little cute. So human in the loop has been around, I guess, what, let's say for at least 6 months now. I forget. Like everything, all the timelines have gotten so compressed that even 6 months feels like an eternity. Human in the loop was basically saying, look, humans are not going to get replaced. Fine. And don't worry. I felt it was a little bit of a pullback by the sort of the AI pushers, because they were freaking people out, right? Like people were getting, and people are still freaked out, but like people were truly getting freaked out. So the human in the loop idea was that, look, there's always going to be a human in either a supervisory role or some sort of collaborative role or a verification role, but humans are always in the loop. Now I've heard at least one mention recently about agent in the loop, and I like that formulation. To me, it feels, maybe it's different, the intent was different when the guy wrote it down, but agent in the loop suggests to me the following. And this is also, by the way, I'll cite another study which you and I talked about a month back. We didn't cover it in our last podcast, so we should talk about this
No, I think it was
MIT study.
just after
Yeah, it had just
we
come out
recorded.
after that 95% of all AI pilots have been, I wouldn't say abandoned, but they've not proven any um, demonstrable
Valuable,
value
yeah,
to
valuable
their,
achievement.
let's call
And
them, to their sponsors. So they've gone in back into the onto the, let's call, they've gone back to the drawing board or whatever. And I think agent in the loop to me is maybe the the readjustment and the realignment of expectations by some of the people that are saying, look, if we're going to make a successful product out of this, we're not going to turn this is not electricity, right? I said this to the other day. Somebody talked to me and I said, they were saying, so Sid, what are your experts comments on this? And I said, look, people were calling this electricity about 6 months ago. They were saying this is as momentous an invention as electricity. um, it's not electricity. I don't think it is. Okay. uh,
we will need a lot more electricity though.
Well,
They were
that's,
right
yes,
around
great
one
point.
day.
Nice joke, Tarik Bish. I think you have a future as a comedian here. But yes, we will need definitely a lot more electricity, but it's not electricity. Uh, the Is it the internet? Is it like internet? Maybe. Even I'm not even convinced right now that it's the internet. And the reason I say this agent in the loop is it's it's the at its most mundane, it's probably a new operating system. Okay, it's like basically Mac OS or iOS or
You know,
whatever. So
I have a very thing about this. I have like a very small thing which I've analyzed about it.
sure, sure.
It's what Siri was supposed to be when Apple came in. You know, when they announced Siri, everybody's brain went to this, the
Yeah,
agent in the loop. They thought it'd be
that's
the
right.
agent with you. And you know,
That's
the
right.
one thing which I've been quite surprised with is that Apple hasn't pushed this AI agent as Siri, as like, their own in-house,
Yeah, Apple's one of those guys they
like
like to be what's called the last mover. So they want to be the last mover. They basically want all this froth to die down.
they will.
And I bet you that's what's going to
They're gonna
happen.
use it.
They're going to wait for all the froth to basically die down. They're going to wait for all the creative disruption, all the you know Theranos overpriced circular transaction bullshit to sort of collapse in the next year, and then they'll come out and say, "Oh, by the way, we've been away working on the real agent in the loop, and it's coming." So, just to close out my thought about agent in the loop, I think agent in the loop is a great formulation because it allows anyone who's trying to sell an agentic AI platform can now
I
say,
think
look,
it's amazing. I think it's amazing.
yeah, agent in the loop is merely this. If you have 10 people doing something, or 15 people, or let's say 10 people, what the agent is going to allow you to do is to either improve efficiency of those 10 people by, let's say, 20, 30, 40%, right? Like basically give them back some of their time, so that you add one extra agent to your operating cost, and you get, let's say, a 30 to 40% efficiency improvement. So you're effectively maybe getting a 3 to 4x improve ROI on your investment. That's kind of the way that I think it should be. Or a
Yeah,
more dire formulation could be that you lay off 3 people and this thing can do the job of 3 people. So you're basically going from 10 to 7 operators. You still need 7 operators because you're not going to replace all of them, but you can have one
I think
agent sort of
I
helping
think that
seven operators do
there's a
the
much
job of
more
seven.
novel there's a much more novel approach to it rather than having to even kick one operator out. What you can do is actually reduce operation hours. So it gives people free time, it gives them a work life balance. That's how you can approach
That
it in a much more
that's even
friendly,
better.
human way. And
Yeah.
I'm thinking about it
Well, I
from,
mean, what?
with our work with Vesta, I'm thinking about it
Yeah,
from like,
but
how will the humans perceive it? Like, the thing is, whatever we build has to be used by humans and has to be accepted by humans. And that's the thing. Like, everybody's forgetting that no matter what model you build, if a human is not using it, it doesn't exist. If like
yeah, no,
nobody is using GPT, then nobody would care.
I'm aligned with that. I just feel like in the capitalist world, and especially in the conditions we're in right now, the odds of somebody looking at agents uh, as something that is a maybe a capital, definitely an opex, not a capex, but maybe maybe capex plus opex investment for a business owner, and the only outcome is that he has employees with more work-life balance is not going to resonate. So yes, I,
No,
I
no,
would
not
I would
work.
love
Like, the
that.
thing is, the employees think it's work-life balance. He just gets lower working hours for his employees, so he gets lower payroll. His
Sure,
payroll actually
and
reduces.
so, absolutely lower working hours. No, I don't think any employee is going to want to basically cut back on their payroll. Everybody wants to. Nobody's going to take a pay cut because they're getting more, work-life balance. That in general doesn't happen. It's not how, unfortunately, the human mind works. Right? Our incentives are aligned to maximize our take-home pay. I read somewhere that basically employees work just enough so that their employers
To
don't
not
fire
get
them,
fired.
and
Yes,
employers
to
pay
not get
just
fired.
enough so their employees don't leave. So it's an equilibrium that agents will probably touch, but I don't think they can upset it too much without causing wholesale sort of upheaval and disruption in society. So that's why I'm saying I'm actually
It's
happy that people are lowering their sights a little bit as far as what agents can do. And I see now a lot of people that, I mean, I'm seeing very subtle things. And maybe this is again like I'm just only connecting my own dots. Everybody has their own insights. But the insights I'm seeing are people are saying, okay, this can't be all things to all people. It's not electricity, but it's definitely the invention of some new tech that will supercharge some things. Like if you go back to how the DeepMind guys have created AlphaFold and protein folding discovery and all that other stuff, drug discovery. I think those kind of very specific targeted um, science driven target mission driven products and developments will probably benefit and will benefit. And now if you throw in quantum, so quantum plus AI is probably going to be another big barrier that's come, huge barrier that's going to be breached. um,
But yeah, all of this stuff will actually be at the forefront, but all of it is that, like, the top researchers and the top people in the field are actually going to benefit from it because it increases their efficiency. The thing is, to use AI, you also have to know how to do the work. That's what people are kind of losing out on a little bit. They think that AI can do the work for you. It does quite an extent of it, but it doesn't do everything. Like, you still need to, and the thing is, people who know how to code very, very well, the top software engineers will get stuff done a lot faster with AI. They'll know what to get done with AI and what
yeah,
not to, and that's the thing. Like, the thing is, what we were discussing yesterday as well with code hygiene and the way people code. Like, there's a very, and I think Andrej, he corrected somebody's tweet. Somebody had posted something. I'll share it with you. I saw it today, and he'd basically said this code is dangerous. Like, I fixed it for you, and it was 3 lines of code, and he wrote it in 35. And it was an import JSON command, and they were trying to
yeah,
build
yeah,
something with
yeah,
Codex,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
and
Yeah,
he was just like
Andrej
that.
is a good
People
guy.
are,
I mean, we like him.
and that's the
No, I
thing,
was
that
saying
a
he's a
lot
very
of it's
thoughtful
coming out,
guy.
and a lot of it is making, yeah.
Yeah. No, I'm saying he's a very
He's a very
thoughtful
thoughtful guy,
guy. I
and
like I
you
like
know,
I like what he says. He says stuff that is measured. I think one thing I heard his really long interview on the Dwarkesh Patel podcast, and the parts of it, there's a lot of stuff there to digest. But I think one part which I thought was telling was that he said, like, I don't do any vibe coding. Like, vibe coding is it's dangerous. It's okay to do vibe coding to build, unit tests for your actual code, but don't vibe code, because it's not going to. It's at the end of the day, it's trained on a corpus of code that you don't know or control, right? So yeah, it might gives you. So it's useful for suggestions. So he uses it for suggestions. I would say that I was using it for suggestions initially, and I really loved the suggestions. And I think I got maybe a. I used to tell people I was getting a 50% productivity boost because of the suggestions, right? The tab completion. So like the whole idea with the initial flavor of
Yeah.
Copilot was you typically all you had to do was write a comment in your code, and then you just waited, and it would sort of think and build you something, and 9 times out of 10 it was exactly what you wanted. It was really all about how well you wrote your comment, and that comment was
I
kind of
think
like a prompt at the
he's
end of the day.
like what he's talking more about is actually generated from LLMs. Like, you take the code which is generated from LLMs, he was saying, and it's dangerous in that way because they concatenate a lot of things, like, as a function, and they use a lot
Yeah,
of functions inbuilt into one
yeah,
function. So you're not actually building the logic
no,
into
no,
it. You're just relying on pre-built logic for a lot of functions because it builds them
yeah,
themselves, right? The way we build it, like the way you write the
yeah,
code also. Every time you take ChatGPT code and you make 5 or 6 edits to it, you're like, no, I want it this way, I want it that way. And the thing is, but it's the best thing to
yeah,
do because you understand every part of it. So if something goes wrong, there is always a
yeah.
fix in your head. You know exactly where it might have gone wrong, what to input, what to change. It's
You know what I
very.
think it's really interesting that you're saying this. I'm thinking that to me, the distinction between vibe coding and not vibe coding is not whether you use tab completions or you actually are telling your cursor or your I don't even, I've not used Codex, but if you're using cursor with the Claude plugin to write entire functions for you, that's still not vibe coding. Okay, to me what vibe coding is, what we did, and we'll come to that, I mean hopefully at some point during our conversation today, what happened yesterday. If you remember, 2 days ago you and I were working on a, what was our assignment? Oh yeah, we'll come to the assignment, but anyway, so bottom line is we started using chat gpt 5, thinking with my pro subscription, not even with my plus subscription. I don't even have a pro subscription yet, so I don't even have the O5, what is it called, codec mini or whatever it's called, the
Pro.
highest. But just even with chat
Yeah, the
gpt
pro.
5 with thinking, it actually generated an entire starter repo for me. Okay, that's vibe coding, because that means that not only is chat gpt or the llm making basically giving me modules, it's making design decisions and architectural decisions about how the code needs to be laid out. So
Yeah.
I feel that when I started modifying that code, I was less likely to want to learn what it was doing. It felt like somebody else's code to me, right? It's not my own code. And I think that's a crucial
Yeah.
distinction. In my view, I would rather continue, even if it reduces my efficiency a little bit. I would rather start with my own code structure, like my own directory structure, stuff that I'm already used to doing, add things. Even file naming is important here. So like, when it basically creates its own repository for you, it decides what to
It
call the
names everything.
files.
Yeah,
It,
it names everything. And there's a very interesting thing about this. I was also thinking about it because the thing is, I'm actually working a lot with code now because of my course and everything, and how we're working with data, and I'm using SQL and multiple different platforms. And what I'm learning is that I ask GPT if it's correct, if it's the right path. I don't ask it to create the code for me because the functions I'm learning to use and the way I'm using them, or the way I'm lining, putting stuff into a dictionary is very different to how GPT does it. GPT tries to make it as short as possible, as sweet as possible, and uses
yeah,
something
yeah,
which I wouldn't personally use. Like, if I wanted to look into it and I want to write code in a way that I'm much
yeah,
newer to it
yeah.
and not as experienced. So when I'm looking to write it, I'm trying to replicate it,
Yeah,
right?
but
So like next time if I was asked to rebuild this, how would I rebuild? How would I rebuild it? Have
But
some
coding
knowledge
is
of
as
it.
much. But the thing
Like
is,
whenever,
you have to realize that, yeah, yeah. But you have to realize that coding is as much an art as it is a science. And the best
yeah, yeah,
coders or
I,
software engineers. I don't consider myself the best. I've been at it long enough to say that I guess I'm definitely a practitioner. I consider myself an artisan. I'm not, you know, I'm a craftsman. I like well written code. But every one of these signatures of my code has a distinct look and feel, and that's my own style of coding, right? It's distinct and it may be inefficient, but it
yeah,
gets the job done, right? So the end of the day, the true test of any piece of software, especially software that's been written for a production grade system, is does it work and can it scale? And I've been writing software for production grade scalable systems for decades, so I know the kind of things that are needed and the kind of things that I'm supposed to keep an eye out for, the gotchas. The problem with a vibe coded repository that has just been handed over to me is that sometimes I feel like, look, this is somebody else's code. And I've been in situations in the past where I inherited somebody else's code. I felt much less ownership of that. Like, it's the difference between being a renter and an owner, right? When you are a renter,
yeah.
typically, you
I
don't
agree
give
completely.
you don't care as much about the apartment you're in, rather than when you're an owner, you want to basically fix even the smallest little chip on the on the front porch, because it's your house, you own it. So I think today I feel like this is the distinction I want to draw between vibe coding and not. I think it's not vibe coding if you've written the bulk of the code, you've decided what the directory structure ought to look like. Most of the files have been, if not all the files have been named by you. Yeah, you even go ahead and you're sort of naming most of the modules. You have a pretty good idea in your head of what the software does. Um, and all you're really doing is you're helping, the AI is helping you sort of write stuff that you would normally take, let's say, I don't know, an hour per function you can get now done in 5 minutes or 10 minutes. So you're getting a
Yeah,
5 to 6x
and I think
boost for certain parts of the code.
like stuff like I completely agree with you. The boost it gives you in the way, and when it comes to just building a basic front end, when it comes to building a lot of basic things which just require labor and require time, and they're very simple to build, but it just takes time. That's what AI does really well. That's what it speeds up for you. It speeds up the dirty work you don't want to do. Like right now, when we were building that front end, we built it in like 5 minutes for the whole first agent we created, and how efficient
Yeah,
it was in doing that is what's actually the benefit. It saves you time in areas you want time saved. And the whole
yeah,
thing about vibe coding and codex, I've looked into it quite a bit, is people just give it an instruction and they let it run overnight and it builds the whole thing. It's like it's an agent which is working in the background,
yeah.
and it never
That's
sits well
dangerous.
with me that
That
that much
feels
of
a
something is
little
being built by somebody else.
that's unsettling. Yeah. But that's almost, again, like, I mean, maybe it's the reason it's unsettling to me and perhaps even to you is because you've seen instances of hallucinations more than I have, more than the normal
Yeah,
person. And for me, it really is unsettling, not just because it's existential and, I feel like, oh shit, my job is going away. That's one way to look at maybe that's one reason why I feel that it's unsettling. I also feel it's unsettling because you don't ever, uh, let something run unsupervised, uh, with such little understanding of how it's actually doing what it's doing, right? And that's the
yeah,
part that I feel. I mean, we in the past, as a software engineer, I've let things run overnight, multiple things, right? You used to run overnight builds. A build was basically you had 20,000 or a million or 10 million lines of code that needed to be compiled. Okay, that whole build script might take 10 hours to run. Okay, you hit
yeah,
the compile button and you went away for the evening and you came back the next morning, confident that only two possible outcomes. There were only going to be two possible outcomes. Either the build will complete or the
either
build will
compiler
fail,
didn't.
and you'll have to go and look at all the
Yeah,
errors. There was no third option.
yeah,
There was no third option. Here, I mean, obviously, here also there's only two options. It'll give you something, My sense is it'll give you something that kind of works, and the further away you go away from knowing how to code, the more likely there's some time bombs in there that will only show up when the system is deployed in some mission critical system, scenario, because it's a black box to you. You don't know what it did. You gave it a prompt, it built something. That's it. That's all you know.
Yeah, and I'm
So
telling you, like I've been seeing it so much, and like I follow a lot of these things. You know how much of it I keep up with the AI news and everything, and I'm like right on top of it, knowing that everything that's coming through the uh, space. And I've been seeing so much of it where people are just like using it to write a lot of code, and I'm just seeing that the more and more they do it, the more errors come up. And the whole agent thing where OpenAI said they wrote 80% of it just with codex. And I was like, okay, but it leaves a lot of errors because you're letting it design a lot of it. You don't want it to design a lot of it. You want to design it yourself.
yeah,
Because the thing is, one thing
yeah,
they did very well is design
yes,
how GPT was laid out and how easy GPT is to use compared to Claude and all of these other LLMs. And I'm not saying this just from my perspective or our perspective. I'm talking about it from like a even like a base consumer perspective. The base consumers were
hmm.
actually running it amazingly.
Yeah. No, I agree. I agree. So again, we are now in the third half. This is actually a really this is a reference to a show that I used to love, called Car Talk from Click and Clack. Some people might get it, but we're in the third half of our show. That means the last 20 minutes of it. I'm trying to keep it at 40 minutes, at an hour. We can go a little lower if you want, but let's just recap all we've done. So, like, we got, as you know, we got the agentic. We got a Q&A chatbot. We had it in. We got the we got the RAG flow done. We started using Olama with Qwen, which we liked. We brought it all in house. That was sort of where we left the last podcast. Since then, I was really interested in getting into sort of the automatic evaluation uh, of our agent, or let's call it a bot. It was really less of an agent, more of a bot at the time. So we started looking into evals again. Used ChatGPT 5 extensively. It generated a bunch of code for us. Again, we definitely coded our way through this. But because I know coding, it wasn't completely blind. I mean, I kind of knew it, and it would, again, it generated a bunch of code that didn't work for us. We had to go fix it. Uh, but I think the gist of the eval phase, how would you characterize what we learned from the
Okay.
eval?
Now, to start off, when we started using Mixtral and doing the eval, so we used Mixtral and we used LLM as a judge, which is quite popular these days and everything. And we wanted to look at this model Prometheus, but I think it's a bit too big for our cluster right now. It's a FP16, it's a 16-bit quantized, so I don't think we can run it. But what we found was that to evaluate you actually need an evaluation matrix, because it was giving us results where llama was the best performing, but in reality it wasn't the best performing, because it's about how complex your question is, right? And when we were asking it questions, we were asking it very very complex specific questions, whereas the other LLMs were giving answers, but when it was LLM as a judge and it created its own evaluation matrix, it was giving very basic questions, and those basic questions were getting answered because they were from the resources we provided.
Yes. Yeah, I
And
got the same sense. I felt like the judge you firstly the type of LLM you used as a judge also mattered on how the eval worked. I mean, so as a way to create some sort of an automated regression test suite for, let's say, like a RAG pipeline based Q&A chatbot that you're building, it made sense to have this whole eval matrix automation in place. But I was again sort of it was another one of those points where I realized this is not like any other type of automated testing. Like, even the eval, if you run it, because then there's an LLM in the mix, sometimes tests will fail. Right? We saw that. We had an
yeah.
instance, you remember, where this test failed,
No, no,
and then
and
we
it
ran
was like the
the
right answer, and it said it
yeah,
failed, but it gave the right answer, and the answer was the same. It's like that when you used to do MCQ
exactly.
and you used to click on the right answer, and it used to be like a wrong answer, and it would say
Yes,
that this is the
yes,
right answer. It was exactly that
exactly,
thing.
exactly.
So
So
let
it's
me just
really, yeah.
let me
Go ahead.
just like at this one point there, and it was very, very interesting to me when we were doing this LLM as a judge. And I was like, how can you trust the judge when the judge is hallucinating? So I said, evaluations in itself have to be done by humans in this thing till hallucination is in control. And you can't really create rag out of rag, because then there's still hallucination in rag, and then how good is the evaluation?
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's still
Yeah,
a very,
it becomes a little bit of a circular thing. Yeah, it becomes circular logic at some point.
but yeah, continuing with the LLM as a judge thing, and I was saying that now what that taught us was the importance of actual language and the importance of the data you feed it. Because when we created more complex questions, that's when it actually started showing us the actual value of it. And now
Yeah.
tomorrow, day after, whenever we're looking at anything related to LLM as a judge or our agents and everything, we need to have some kind of, how do you say it? You need to be able to trust it. There needs to be a trust factor in it, right? Because
Yeah.
we're giving it sensitive information. And after all of this evaluation, we actually decided that Qwen was the best for us. What we found out was Quen was actually the most friendly to use. Like when we were giving it prompts, it was actually responding to our prompts. And you know what was really funny was I saw Airbnb say that they were using many small Quen agents and open source different LLMs to build these agents. And I was like, what our gut was saying was that Quen was responding the best, even though
Yeah.
you can't put it.
Yeah.
And we had that same feeling with GPT-4 Mini and Mini High,
Oh,
and it's like these
yeah.
models which are human-like. They have like this human
Yeah.
element to them, right? They're not trying to excel at
Yeah.
every metric, but
Yeah.
they're giving you reliable conversation in terms of conversation or
Yeah.
prompting or whatever you call it. And
Well, I mean, the psychophancy problem is a well-known issue, as we all know, right? I mean, the psychophancy thing is with, I think, didn't GPT release a problem like a
yeah,
model that was horribly psychophantic,
yeah, it
and then they
was.
try to fix it. They put a whole bunch of system prompts in, and there's all these guys who are saying, look, AI is going to kill humanity for this reason
You
only. That
can't you can't
no
really
matter
fix
what you
it.
put in the system
Yeah,
prompt, no matter what you put in the system prompt, it will find a way to basically avoid using the system prompt. So I think, anyway,
yeah,
that's a
it will.
topic for another day. That's a topic for another day. But yeah, yeah, I agree. I think Quen worked out well for us. We really liked the balance between sort of you know parameter size and performance, and we are able to run it locally on our using just a. I think we have a four GPU. It has a four core. It has four
No,
GPUs, right?
it's a decent
That
sized GPU. We've got a 16 gig GPU right now with virtual machine
yeah,
running. It's a
yeah,
G4D and
yeah,
extra large. And
yeah.
what I actually found out, which I was going to talk to you about, but we started recorded today. I have a 3080 with 16 gigabytes of VRAM, so we can actually run whatever we want off my computer, which I have here.
Yeah,
So
I see a lot of people doing that. In fact, today I was on another call with another colleague of mine or a collaborator, you could call him. He and I, we're doing stuff on the side, and he has a like a really old M1 chip from he has a Mac running an old M1 chip. It's not even that new, but it's got 32 gigs of RAM. I didn't realize this, but the M1 chip actually has this interesting architecture where it's both a GPU and a CPU. They're
CPU
sort of
inside it,
overlaid on
yes,
top of each.
yes, yes.
They've got a GPU inside it, and I don't know how many GPUs there are, but like you can run inferencing on an M1, right? That's well known. I mean, I didn't know that, but I now believe it because I've seen it. And he also has, I think, a GeoForce. He has like a HP with two different uh,
GPUs.
NVIDIA based GPU
Yeah.
add-on cards that he's doing inferencing on. So yeah, I think for us, I feel like there's probably two directions I want to take. One is maybe let's try and spend some time. Let's make our next mini project be. We should talk about the project we're currently on and maybe see what we want to do next with
Yeah, so
that.
let's
And then
let's
the next thing I want to do after we've done with this is really start to explore how to run this stuff locally, because clearly there's a lot of spare capacity that is just waiting to be tapped. And I don't mean And I don't mean all the new what are they called, the H100s. Is that the new?
No,
Is
it's
that the
the
thing that?
BGM 300s, which are the new ones. H100s are quite old now, so are
No, no,
H200s.
H1000s or whatever, like the Nvidia chips that Nvidia is not allowed to sell to China.
300s, the 300s, the new
The
300s.
300. Okay, so so you can do a lot without having to pay $50,000 per 300. And I think that I definitely want to focus on over the next month.
Yeah, it's like what I've started to realize very quickly is we will actually start getting more into the research aspect of it and actually trying to optimize LLMs, because what we are figuring out is whatever we're building, there is some dependency on the open source LLMs and stuff. Maybe we can take an open source model and train it our own way to make it better. Work with context, work with all of these small things that we're looking to find. But before we get to any of that, we recently what we've started doing is deeply looking into the service industry and people, as in every single industry where they're a key part, because what we found is information is actually at the center of all the problems which stem in
Yeah,
most industries. You take manufacturing, you take the hotel industry, you take the restaurant industry, you take even taxis. If the taxi driver had more information, right? And what we've actually come to see is that we, from our own knowledge, created a large data set of particulars that are there in three Michelin star restaurants and what it would take to be
yeah,
the best service, and what
yeah.
the best information would be. And I sent Sid this video. I showed it to him yesterday, and he understood exactly what I was trying to put output, but it couldn't have been done better than the video did it, right? In terms of the information and the lack of information
Yeah.
and why.
No, I think that, yeah, the key aspects of the video was that there is one sort of master chef who controls in her head everything that's happening around her through a series of mostly it's actually she's literally got a scratch pad, like a
Yeah,
paper.
yeah.
But the magic is not in the paper or even the technology. It's in her head, it's in her know-how, it's in her operational knowledge. So to me, the most interesting thing about that video was that she was able to run a restaurant down to the micro, let's say the second, and keep the quality of service up and be completely aware of what was happening in that restaurant.
and
Uh,
and that's,
they, yeah, by virtue of having this, just
yeah.
this scratch. So, and my feeling is that you don't need to get fancy. I think last year, or even like the till about last month, you and I were talking about, oh, graph rag is better than rag. All that's great, right? A graph database, wonderful, right? Uh, but I think sometimes simplicity and is actually key. And what I think the direction I want to explore now is just natural language instructions and context to create better behaving bots and agents. That's really what I want to do. And I think it's really all about context. It's all about basically what we give the system prompt, how much information we give to the system prompt, and how that system prompt information grows, how the memory scratch pad grows, right? How it's pruned. This is really what I think is going to be
We're
super
going to
critical
dive
for the
deeper
next
into,
maybe.
we're going to learn to optimize all of this. And I mean, as the project comes to life, and hopefully more and more people get interested in what we're doing with this thing, it's more of a way for us to continue working on things which will make a difference. And that's what's important to both of us, is that we make a difference in whatever work we do and it does some good. Like whatever we build is a helpful tool. And I think this, for the hospitality industry, what we're working on, even if it's not going to show the most efficiency, what it does is bridges communication, right, through whatever methods
Yeah,
we're trying to do. And once we've done more
yeah,
of that, we'll share it on here and we'll share the whole journey. And everybody listening with us can see exactly what went down and how we started and what we were looking at. But I think that it's a very interesting space to get into, and I think that more than the human in the loop, where it's like supercharging humans and giving everybody better quality of life, right? You give the server more information, that's better for them. It makes their life easier.
yeah,
It makes the customer's experience better. You get to bring up
yeah,
everybody to the same level using information and knowledge. It's not anything else. We're not giving them something which doesn't exist, right? It's there.
Yeah.
We just make it more accessible. And accessibility is actually something which is so underrated and overlooked, because people are not thinking about that, right? Everybody is looking at the bigger things to optimize. Nobody looks at the
Yeah.
basics. And it's a very, very, it like comes down to that you must have mastered the basics to be good at anything. Because a lot of the faults,
Which is a really important point that you bring up. I think what we don't want to create is yet another technology that's going to destroy minds. We don't want to create a mind destruction technology like social. I mean, at least that should be the aim. So I think the design philosophy and the principles and the values that we want to adopt for anything we build is that it's not going to ski for you. It's not going to basically do your homework for you. It's going to help you do your homework by forcing you to learn, and pushing. It'll be like a really helpful study buddy,
we just want to make
a
people
study
better.
partner.
You know,
Yeah,
that's the thing.
yeah.
We want to
So
make it
in the
easier to
sense
improve.
of, yeah, and it's the second. It's the best. To me, the best analogy is the second brain analogy, which is basically having a second brain that maybe frees you up from having to do rote learning. Rote learning is supposedly bad, although it can't all be bad. You definitely need some rote learning because that's all recall, right? How else are you going to be useful at anything? So you have to learn how to do stuff. If there are 10 steps to doing some complex thing, you have to learn how to remember that. That's rote learning at some level. But
And exactly that.
yeah.
And one
Anyway,
more
so yeah, I
thing
think
to
this is
add to
this
it
is great.
all
I
is,
think this is really a great branch off. I mean, let's call it a good terminus for our current session. I think that the next time we meet, I expect that we'll have some interesting insights into both how.
maybe we can bring somebody
Uh,
on. Maybe we can bring somebody on to
yeah,
speak with.
I mean, if we can find somebody who's actually done this, if we can, I don't think we want to book any celebrities. We just want to bring someone who's
Yeah,
most likely it'll be one of our collaborators. One of the people
it'll
that
be
I'm
somebody
working with.
we're
We'll get them
working with, or
on.
somebody we
Guinness is
know.
usually,
It is
if
not
he
going to be.
agrees to come on, if he agrees to turn his camera on, or we'll basically have an avatar of him. But we'll see
Guinness.
how that works.
Of Guinness.
Yeah,
We'll.
but yeah, it's good. I think this is a good stopping point. Was there any last thoughts,
I think I have
comments you wanted to make?
one just final thought, and that was to say that maybe that we haven't been very regular recording, but it's actually been, no excuses or anything. We'll try and get these sessions done more often and share with you, and hopefully you'll still want to listen to
Yeah.
us.
Having said that, I think I
And that
like that we have a lot to say, and I think the reason we have a lot to say is because we don't record every week.
no, I
So
think we record
I
when it's
think I
useful.
like to say, yeah, I want to only record when we have something useful to say, which means that at best we'll probably be doing one recording every maybe 3 weeks.
Once, yeah.
At worst, we might go about 5 to 6 weeks without recording, but that's okay. This is for an audience of one right now, or maybe 5 or 10. I forward this to my close friends and family, and I'm sure you do
Yeah,
the
some of
same.
my friends are
Oh
listening to
yeah,
it as well.
so,
But like the
good.
one thing that we I think we've both achieved doing this actually has been beneficial for us, is keeps us motivated to keep going at this, and it helps us accelerate our
Yes,
learning as well.
yes, yes, yes. Nothing motivates like a deadline. I think I'm glad you pushed us to record today because I'm now that it's behind us. Now we can focus on the rest of the stuff. So I'm
Yeah, no,
glad we
like I
got it
like
done.
setting it, like, and what we've been learning is that we setting ourselves deadlines and like setting ourselves achievable goals which we want to get done every week, and want to push through, is what's actually keeping us progressing, because we look forward to just getting it done, and then we look at the next thing. And the thing is, we have
Yep,
no
yep.
we have no problem letting go. And like, that sunk cost
Yeah,
fallacy is nothing to us. Like, we don't care about the sunk cost. It's gone. Like, we
we
can't
don't
hold
care.
on to it.
It's gone. It's
There is no
gone. Just
anchor
move
with
on.
us. It's
Move
just
on.
going forward.
Yeah, yeah.
And I
All
think
right,
we'll end
cool.
there. And hopefully we taught you something while we learned doing as much as we could.
Yep. Please send us your thoughts, comments, rants, anything. Yeah, anything is better than silence. So look
Yeah,
forward
even
to
if you
hearing
didn't
from
like
you.
us, tell us why you didn't like us. We're open to everything. But I hope you liked us.
All right. Take
Take
care.
care. See you guys next time. Bye.
Bye.